Welcome to the Honest Business Podcast. This is the show for ambitious, value-driven business owners who are actively building a business that works for them. Hi, I'm May James, and I'm here to make scaling your business easier and more rewarding than ever. Each week, we will dive into simple, sustainable strategy and pragmatic leadership discussion to support you as you take imperfect action on your entrepreneurial journey. If you want to stay ahead, exceed your growth goals, and have a purposeful, thriving business, then keep on listening. Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very well. Excited to dive into this topic today, which we are going to be talking about thinking beyond 7 figures in your business planning, which sounds a bit strange, but what I mean by that is what happens often is we get very stuck and stagnant in what we are forecasting for ourselves and what we want and what we want to achieve from a visionary perspective and from a mission perspective, but then the finances and the business plan and the strategy doesn't always work out. So let's talk into that today and kind of dive into it. So what I see a lot with people, and often this is people who have successful businesses, who are doing really cool things, who are making stuff happen, is that they will have a very big vision. And you might have this really big vision for yourself, and you have a big mission, and you have this big intent to make impact in the world, to change things, to be a good person, to do this, to do that. And then what happens is I then look at people's business models, people's business plans, people's business strategy, and I'm like, there's this real disconnect. And so today I wanted to talk about and go on this journey of trying to explain and give you an alternative way of maybe looking at things, just so that you can maybe stop this from happening for you. So what a typical example of this will be is people create mission statements for their business and their brand, and they create them often out of thin air, or they create them when they're doing their branding. They can create them from a vision they have in their head, and they create, brand values, mission statements, vision statements, all sorts of different things. And all of that's great, and that's fine, and that's good, and you need that, there's reasons why you would have that in a business. However, what often happens is people's mission statements and the vision that they have for their business often is way bigger than the business that they're actually creating and the business model that the business is housed within. And I think this is a really interesting conversation because it's kind of it's just a bit backwards. It doesn't make sense. And you can kind of just sometimes feel a bit like, oh, well, even if everything went so amazingly well and went so great, it would never work out. And people just don't seem to get that. So, for example, some people's mission statements will have help 10 million women by then this time, by 2026 or something. And I'm like, cool. I love that. I think that's great. But I'm like, the output that you are doing and the steps you are taking and the way your business is designed does not make sense. That's not going to happen. It's not going to work. Even if it's on a free basis, I'm like, it doesn't make sense. And so that's just quite an extreme example. There's many other examples which are less extreme, where I just sometimes feel like, what's going on here? This doesn't make sense. So this is not about reducing your vision. This is not about saying be more realistic. This is about me saying your business model needs to get a bit better. You need to improve. This is about me saying, if you are seriously committed to helping this many people, then why is your business vision in the sense of your physical business so small? And this is a real issue that people have to get their heads around of if you are saying you want to be one thing, as in some kind of leader that helps so many people and has this thing and has that thing, but then actually the business that you're going to house this all in is never going to be able to hold that level of leadership and that level of responsibility, then the whole thing's just a bit pointless. I mean, it's not pointless in the sense of it will create impact to some degree, but not anywhere near the scale that you're suggesting that you want to happen. And I think this is the thing that's interesting, because I think sometimes people think that their business isn't growing and it's for a reason, when actually often it's that there's just not enough going on. The business in the first place is not designed to provide whatever it is that they're trying to get. Now, if you, for example, want to create something really huge and is really clear on where you're going, then that's cool. Like, let's do it. But I think a lot of the time people are kind of holding themselves back because they think it sounds so crazy, or they think it sounds so weird, and I'm doing air quotes here, or they think it's so far off from what is actually possible for them to create that they just don't give themselves the option. And that's what's really sad. Like, why not have a business plan for £100 million a year business? Why can't that be that? Why can't that happen in 3 years? There's no, like, you don't have to, just because everyone else talks about creating a 6-figure business or creating a 7-figure business, like, why can't it be an 8-figure, a 9-figure, a 10-figure business? And this is where you have to really start thinking about, from a business mindset, of what makes sense. Obviously, market cap's a thing. Obviously, market fit's a thing. Obviously, market size is a thing. But let's remember that now more than ever, people are actually increasing market size of industries, which is one of the things that's, is massive. People are changing demand. People are not just hitting demand and finding demand and seeking out people who are in demand. Brands can create this demand like never before. And so you need to rip out the playbook of what you think is realistic and possible. And you need to really install it with the vision, the mission, a clear targeted proposal, a clear understanding of who you even, help, and what your proposal is and what your proposition is and what your offer does. Have clear service or product, like crystal clear. And then you need to create a business strategy related to the actual size that you really want it to go. Now, obviously, if you are sat at 100 grand a year business and you want to get to 100 million, there's a hell of a step between that. But it's more than doable. It's just about you really having space and more than likely having someone who can help you to see things from a strategic vision and allow you to be the visionary you want to be in a safe space for you to actually go and do that work of mapping it out. And this is where I help people, because me having this conversation with you now is not a usual conversation, right? If you're someone who does 150 grand a year and you're saying, do you know what? I'm ready to take this now. I want to take it to a £50 million a year business. I want to take it to a £100 million a year business. I get how bizarre that's going to sound to some people, and the reaction you're going to get from some people is not going to be the most expansive or helpful, potentially. So this is the sort of thing where you hire someone like me to support you to actually say, right, let's work out how we can get you there and how long this is going to take. Because it might take 10 years, it might take 20, it could take 3, it could take 4, it could take 2. Like, it depends on the resource we have and what you need. But I think it's really time to start thinking bigger than just your business and what it does now. Because you can keep with that and that's fine. There's no, you don't have to do this. But this is an opportunity and an episode for people to kind of start thinking about, what if I do want something bigger? What if I do want to create a movement? What if I do want to create a whole societal shift in addition to my business? And the business is just the catalyst that holds it, but there's a whole host of other stuff that goes on between it. A great example of this is let's just say Uber. They changed the market and how people shopped for their product and service. Their product and service was a taxi service, yeah? But that is not their business. Their business went beyond that in so many ways and really changed so much. And then they went and tried to do it with other markets, and some of them were successful and some of them weren't. As in Uber Eats, there was different other knockoff things that they did. And I think what's really important to think about here is you don't have to stay in a box. People feel, I think, very put in a box. You can make £1 million a year and you still feel in a box. You can make 10 million a year and you're still in the box. You're in an industry, you're in this, you're in that. I'm encouraging you to say, right, why don't we look at taking that just away and just enter in a different world and enter in a different option and a different reality and a different set of circumstances? That's really exciting and it's fun. I get that it's a bit off the wall and some people would be like, I haven't thought about it like that. But this is the point of this conversation, to have just an exploration in your head as to what is possible. And one example I'm going to talk about is about this bizarre thing that goes on with Dragon's Den. I don't know if you're familiar with Dragon's Den. I don't particularly watch it now. I haven't watched it in years. but it's still on the TV. And if you're in other parts of the world, it's like a show where it's a bit like Shark Tank in the US. It's very much like a show where entrepreneurs, small business owners rock up and they pitch to a panel of investors who are somewhat well known and some aren't, and they pitch for investment with an equity share. It's been on TV in the UK for years and years and years, and there's probably something similar in whichever country you're listening to. And when you look at shows like that, it just baffles me sometimes. Now, as I said, I haven't watched them in a long time, but the format tends to never really change. But there's fantastic examples. If you go and watch, they're all on YouTube. Like, you can go and watch, just type in like Dragon's Den pitch, and there'll be some very fascinating pitches. And some of them are great and some of them are not so. But what astounds me and baffles me is how much equity people will give away in their business for such little in return. And this, I honestly believe, comes down to the fact that they just don't have a clue. And that's not me patronising people, like, you know, you start a business, you don't have a clue. That's just a fact, like, it's all right, you know. Everyone starts from zero. But it really shocks me because, like, people, like, go in with, like, mad requests. And on the programme, they ask and they say, you know, I want 50 grand of investment for 20% equity. And I'm sat there thinking, 50 grand for 20% equity. Like, it's wild. And now, obviously, some people want investment just purely for them to coach them and mentor them and to help with their networks and to connect them with people, right? So that is a huge part of it. And I totally understand that and get that. And I think in recent years, from what I have seen, that's pretty much the whole reason everyone goes on in the first place. But what astounds me is this lack of understanding of profitability and growth potential. Those two things are where so many business owners fall down, whether you go on Dragon's Den or you don't. If you're an online business owner, this applies to you. If you're someone in a traditional market, this applies to you. Understanding your profitability is so key. If you are making 6 figures at the moment, it might be that you don't have a clue what your profitability is, or you have a rough idea, but then since how everything has changed and costs have gone up, you actually don't know. The profitability system really needs to be in place before you try and create these bigger plans. And when I'm talking to you about thinking beyond 7 figures, what I'm saying to that is, does your business model even work from a profitability perspective in those numbers? Because some people don't. You know, some things you can't change. Some things you don't have scale potential. Some of them don't have the growth potential in them to make sense. So it might make sense as a 300 grand a year business or a 600 grand a year business, but it might not in a 2 million a year business. And you need to look at that and you need to think about it and really sit in your business model and what you want. And this is why it comes back to, what are you going for, and the vision. Because you can create impact in any way. Impact is so different from a service you offer. So if you want to impact and change people's lives, the modality and the vehicle you use to create that impact can be done in about 10,000 different ways. It just depends on, what do you want the outcome to be? What do you want the price to be? What do you want the brand to be? How do you want to approach it all? And then looking at your growth potential is really about understanding, like, where do you want this to go and who do you want to sit alongside in terms of competitors, in terms of market fit, like, who do you want to fit inside of? I think if you're a food and drinks brand, that's so easy to do because you literally can physically go to supermarkets and you can be like, well, I want to be on the shelf with this person and I want to be, you know, in competition with that person. For many other industries, that's quite difficult to do because you might be in an industry where it's not obvious who that is, or it might be that you don't play in a world where there's a lot of competitors. You might be in a market where it isn't very competitive at all. But most people listening will have a really competitive market, and you have to start thinking about, where do you want to be and what does that mean? Whilst we're talking about funding and profitability, I just want to touch on this idea of bootstrapping and going the funded route and what do you do. Now, this isn't an episode for me to tell you which you should do, but I want to just just make a point on it. When you are planning to move your business from 500 grand a year to 2 million a year, depending on your business model, you might need funding. Not everybody does, but some people do. what I would say is, if you can, find any other... should I say this? Yeah, I'm going to. Find any other finance funding option other than equity, if possible. And this is for a specific business, so listen up. If it's that you need funding to get from 500 grand a year to 2 mil because you need a chunk of money to be able to buy you time over a 12-month period to hire staff in order for that growth and that scale to occur, then please, if you can, I would personally suggest, and I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm a business advisor, so just take that with a pinch of salt. I'm not giving you financial advice. It makes sense to use a non-equity approach, because when you get a business model at 500, that, especially if it's like an agency style model, or if it's a service that, especially if it's business to consumer service, that is where I often find that this works well, that you might need some funding, but it might not make sense for both parties, to be fair, to do an equity split and to get involved equity wise. Now, there's many other options you can do to get funding without going down a normal investors, because I don't think many people understand when you get investors what that truly means for your business and how serious that is and how complex it is and how difficult it is to buy them out and the whole rigmarole that goes on around it. Now, for some people, you might need investment and you might need just to go the full hog and just do normal traditional investing and getting an equity and getting all the rest of it. And that's great. It can have some massively huge benefits, like really massive, huge advancements can come from that. But I think what's really important is that you understand what the potential risks are from each option, and actually understanding that it's okay if you're sat at 500 grand a year or 600 or 700. I'm just using 500 because 500 is where I've seen it it starts to come really into play. It's okay if you feel really capped at that and you feel like we're making all this money and we should just pour all the money back into it, but then you might find that pouring all the money back into it just isn't enough. And so there's this gap and this gaping hole where you're like, I just don't know what to do. And you feel like, well, I've just kind of got to stick at it. And maybe you can get to another, 100 grand extra. But it's that huge scale that you're thinking about where your profit really tips over the balance scale of being like, wow, we're actually now seriously profitable versus, yeah, we make enough profit to take, if there's two of you, 2 founders' wages home, that sort of thing. Or if there's, a team of 5 of you, or even if there's a one-man band, but you've got a decent-sized team, it all adds up. And so, really thinking about what do you need to grow and what does that mean for the business? Because you've got to think longer term. Because what you don't know is if you get to the 2 mil a year, will you, once you're there, want to get to 20 mil a year? And if you do, and you've then got a whole bunch of investors, and you've already got a lot of finance, that can get really tricky because it's then again another switch. And that 2 to 20 million can be a real push. It can be easy for some people. It just depends on your business model. And I say easy, it's never really easy, but it can be seamless and it can feel quite easy to achieve on paper. So have a think about that as you're thinking about your business, where it's at. The other thing to think about is understanding where trends are cyclically in your industry. And where does your business fit into the business landscape of this time? This is massively true for D2C brands. If you are a direct-to-consumer brand, this is so important. Because this is where we see the rise and fall of D2C brands hugely. And right now there's a real thriving time for D2C brands. I'd argue there's never been more of a time for it. But there's also a very sort of, I don't want to say taking time bomb with it, but there's an element of you have to make sure that you're getting in at the right time and you are at a point of scale at the right time to ultimately maximize on profit. And what do I mean by that is, you might be comfortably make £1 million a year. And you might think, I do actually fancy going more. but I'm not sure. If you're having a really great time at $1 million right now, the market, you might only have 3 or 4 years where you can really go for it to hit some mega money before you might have to contract in size to then grow again when the market shifts. And again, this is me speculating, so don't take this as like a crystal ball, like fully this is the be all and end all. No, but when you look at changes and when you look at business growth, it is sensible to think that the opportunity window you have is not there forever, because it just isn't. Beauty is a great example of the beauty industry where that had massive growth periods, years and years and years ago, and then it kind of shrunk a bit. But then over the last, 7 years, there's been a huge, massive wallop of growth. But I personally feel like we're seeing the end of that. And I know many of the predictions and many of the things say, no, it's going to continue to boom and boom and boom. And of course, it's still going to continue to grow, but I don't think it's going to grow at the pace in which it has in such aggressiveness that it has previously. And that's just one example of one industry. But beauty's a great example, especially from a D2C brand perspective, because people are quite maxed out now. People are quite bored of just buying and buying and buying and buying and buying. And so now all these beauty brands are coming out and all the celebrity brands are coming out at the tail end of this. The ones who started years and years back, as in the Glossiers of the world, and the people who were really innovating at a time when that made sense, have won. But we've seen what's happened to Glossier over the last few years, and they've massively retracted back because, things have a timeline. And I'm not saying that means you can't build a cult brand in 2022 and you can't start something that's going to literally be there for a lifetime. Not at all, because these brands are still going to be there. But I just mean the virality and the appetite of consumer only lasts for a certain time before people want to move on to something else. And then they come back round. But your business plan needs to take into account that. It needs to be allowing that to come and play. So if you are, because I know most people listening to this will probably not be a product-based business, and if you are a service-based business, a great example of this is certain marketing agencies and what they do. So, for example, podcast agencies, having a big moment over the last few years because podcasting has gone huge, and that's amazing and that's great. If you tried to set up a podcasting agency 10 years ago, podcasts existed, but it would nowhere near be as popular as now. So if you'd launched it 10 years ago compared to if you'd launched 2 years ago, the speed in which your growth could excel is vastly different. And I still think this now in 2022, I still think you can start a podcast agency for sure. Will we in 5 years' time, will the potential for growth still be at that point? I'm not sure. I don't think any of us know. But you have to understand that if you want to grow, and when we're talking in this episode about growing beyond 7 figures, don't drag your timelines out and think that it has to take you 10 years to get to 100 million if actually you can do it in 20 million, but then that might mean the 20 million in a less time frame. It might mean that you do have to get investment from somewhere. And there's always this juggle, right, between time frame and investment, because that's obviously often the difference. So sometimes it's like we can go down the bootstrapped route, but it's going to take 4, 5, 6 times as long. And I'm not saying this is fact, by the way, I'm just using it as an example and as a what if. Whereas if you take the funded route, it might take you 2 years instead of 6. And that's something what you have to weigh up in your head, but you need to do this with someone who understands what is actually happening, because this is the stuff you just can't decide. It's not your opinion. That's not going to work. That's a disaster waiting to happen. This is about you analysing and looking at clear market fit and looking at industry and looking at trend and looking at where are things going. And this is why you need to work with people who fully understand business as a full acumen and as an expertise and as an industry, because it isn't just a case of you coming with a fun idea and saying, I want to do this and I want to do that, and then being like, okay, great, we'll make it happen. That works to a certain degree. It works if you want to get to 100 grand, 200 grand, 300 grand a year. But if you are trying to build something that's like, I would argue 9 million a year upwards. Like, it's got to be so strategic and planned out and clear and focused in your head. Really focused. I'm going to leave it there today because I know this is a bit of a different episode from usual, but I hope it's maybe got you to think about, what do you want out your business? How big do you want it to be? Are you building something that is a 7, 8 or 9 figure company, and are you not? And if you're not, that's totally cool. And if you are, how is that going to work? How are you going to get that all out on paper? How are you going to record that? How are you going to track it? These are the questions we need to be thinking about, and it's what you need to think about moving forward, of how do you really, in essence, live in the belief that whatever your mission is going to be achieved, and then also expand your vision consciously, continuously along the journey, because your vision's always going to change, and sometimes you will be disappointed and sometimes you will be really excited, but it will change, and the world changes and markets change and industry changes, and most of all, which is most important, is consumers change. And what consumers want out of a business and a brand are evolving at such a rapid rate that people are struggling to keep up. And so we have to be open to that, and we have to be ready to respond when necessary and when appropriate to do so. I will speak to you next week. Take care. Have a great day or evening, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Honest Business Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you are subscribed. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others and leave a rating and review. To catch up with all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram @may.james_, where I share the raw, uncut, behind the scenes reality of what running multiple businesses every day truly looks like. As always, links and any resources that were mentioned in the episode will be in the show notes below. That's all for this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next time.